Today we're going to talk about dividing decimals. And in fifth grade, when we divide decimals, we are only dividing one decimal number by a whole number. So you'll only deal with either the dividend or the divisor being the decimal. You will never see two decimals in the problem. So the first thing that I want to go over very quickly is just a quick reminder on the parts of a division problem that we talked about at the beginning of the year. So for example, I have this problem here, 3 and 1200ths divided by 3. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what each of those numbers represent. So I'm going to start with the 3 and 1200ths. The 3 and 1200ths is the what part of the division problem. So this is going to be your dividend, and I'm going to label it as dividend on my sheet. Then, of course, the red division sign we have there is obviously our division sign. It's hard to see because that's colored pencil. My red decided to stop working. And then the blue number there, the 3, is going to be called our divisor. So there's that. I've underlined the answer in green just because I want you to remember the answer to a division problem is called the quotient. So it looks like that. So we are going to talk about how to solve this modeling first, and then we'll go into the box method for division like we talked about earlier in the year. So the first thing that I want to do is I need to illustrate, or I need to model this first number, the dividend, 3 and 1200. So I'm going to model that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be kind of turning my computer up so that way you can see how I've modeled it on my paper. Couple weeks ago in class we were talking about how to model these different decimal numbers, and we've done a little bit more practice with the warm-ups that we've been doing in class as well. So I'm going to flip my computer up and show you how I've modeled that problem. So it is right here. So I have 3 hundreds boards that represents my 3 holes. I have my tenth right here, and then I have my hundredths listed there. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how I can divide these into groups of 3. Well, obviously I have 1 whole for each group. So I can split those 3 hundreds boards up right there into 3 groups. So I'm going to draw circles on my paper in order to represent how I'm breaking these up. So here's the circles that I've drawn on my paper like this. They're not very good, but that's okay. They're going to do for this. So I've put 100s board in each of the circles. And now I see that I have a tenth and 2 hundredths left. And I don't have enough of each of those to put into each group and make them be equal. I mean, I could take my tenth and put it there, but neither of the other 2 groups have a tenth in it, so they're not equal. So that's not going to work. What I can do, though, and what we have learned and talked about, is I can take this tenth and exchange it for hundredths. So how many hundredths make up a tenth? So I'm going to exchange it on my paper while you guys are thinking about the answer to that question there. And as I exchange it here, you guys are going to see when I flip my computer screen back up how many tenths are in or how many hundredths are in a tenth. So you can look here. So I have my 3 hundredths, or I have my 3 wholes, 3 wholes. I have my 2 hundredths from my original problem. And then over here, I've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've added 10 hundredths as well because 10 hundredths make a tenth. Now, what I can do to each one of these is I can take these hundredths here. I have 12 hundredths. And I can just start dividing them into 3 groups. So I'm going to start first by taking this one, 1, 1. So each group has 1 whole and 1 hundredth in it right now. I'm going to do it again. Uh-oh, that one flipped. 1, 1, 1. Each group has 1 hundredth, 1 whole, and 2 hundredths in each groups. I've got more down here though that I have to do. So I've got that one, and that one, and I've got 3 more down here. So it looks like these are going to split evenly into 3 groups. Now my quotient, my answer, I will find in how much I have in one group. So right here, I'm able to tell that I have 1 whole and 1, 2, 3, 4 hundredths. So my quotient here is going to be 1 whole and 4 hundredths, or 1 and 4 hundredths, and it's going to look like that. So now I can show you how to take this and set it up in the box way, which is what we've practiced before. And it's going to look something like this. So here's what I've got. I've got my 3 and 12 hundredths right there inside of my model, inside of my division bar, or house, sorry. And then I've got my 3 sitting on the outside here. So what I've got to do, and if you notice here, I've got a special place for my decimal point. The thing when we multiply decimals is that any number that's inside of your house, which is going to be your dividend, that decimal likes to sit up on the roof. So I need to take that decimal and put it directly on top where it was in my problem. So now all I'm going to do is divide as if I have 2 whole numbers, basically. I've moved my decimal straight up so I know that it goes there. So now I've got to look back and ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 3? Well, 3 can go into 3 one time. I know that 1 times 3 is 3, so I set it up like this, and I know that 3 minus 3 is 0. Now, with that 0, I'm going to take it and move it over to the 1. So I'm going to draw my arrow, move it over, add my 1 right there. How many times can 3 go into 1? Well, 3 can go into 1 0 times. If I only have one thing, I can't make a group of 3. So I have 0. I know that 0 times 3 is 0. Got my subtraction problem. 1 minus 0 is 1. And I have to take that 1 up and over to the 2. So now I have to ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 12? Well, I know that 3 can go into 12 4 times because I know that 4 times 3 is 12. So when I subtract there, I'm going to get 0 as my answer. So therefore, my answer is 1 and 4 hundredths. Now, that was using base 10 models with things that we've been working on in class. We're not always going to have these base 10 models, and we're not always going to have the big, nice, chunky blocks to work with. So we're going to have to learn how to use with our decimal grids, which is the next problem that I want us to look at. So this problem, and I'm going to cut this off. Well, no, I'm not. This problem right here is 1 and 4 tenths divided by 2. So I'm going to start again by modeling 1 and 4 tenths. And I know that in order to model 1 and 4 tenths, I have to shade in one of the whole decimal grids. So I'm going to shade in this one whole decimal grid here in blue. I've got that one whole decimal grid shape.